The sun hung low over the dusty plains of Arizona, painting the horizon in streaks of burnt orange and fading gold. The small, wind-bitten town of Willow Creek sat quietly between the hills, its wooden saloon doors creaking in rhythm with the evening wind. Folks around here had seen enough hard times to break a man's back, droughts, dust storms, and a war that had taken more sons than anyone cared to count. But on that day, all the town's whispers circled around one strange event: the cowboy who bought himself a bride for $2. His name was Caleb Ward, a rugged rancher known for his silence more than his words, a man with calloused hands, sad eyes, and a heart buried deep beneath the scars of a lonely past. He walked with purpose, his boots echoing against the wooden porch of the town's small auction barn where desperate souls and broken dreams were often traded. Inside, a small crowd gathered, not for cattle or horses this time, but for something far more shocking. A young girl standing in a faded white dress, trembling, clutching an old locket against her chest as if it was the only thing keeping her heart from falling apart. Her name was Lydia Grace, 19 years old, an orphan with nowhere left to go after her family lost their homestead to debt collectors. The auctioneer's voice cut through the air like a blade. $2, he shouted mockingly, expecting laughter, but silence fell instead when Caleb Ward raised his hand. He didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't look at anyone. He simply placed $2 silver on the table and walked forward, claiming the girl like a man rescuing something fragile from a burning house. The crowd watched in stunned quiet as the cowboy took her hand and led her outside. Lydia's heart pounded with fear and confusion. She didn't know what kind of man would buy a bride, or what he might expect in return. Caleb said nothing on the long ride back to his ranch, his shadow long against the desert sands, his silence almost protective. When they finally reached his small wooden cabin by the creek, he helped her down from the horse, offered her water, and said softly, "You're safe here." Those 3 words struck her harder than anything else that day, because they didn't sound like ownership. They sounded like mercy. That night, Lydia sat by the small fire inside the cabin, staring at the rough wooden walls and the single chair that stood empty across from her. Caleb had gone outside to tend to the horses, his lantern bobbing in the darkness. When he returned, he set a blanket near her feet and said, "You can take the bed. I'll sleep out here." Lydia looked up, surprised. You don't want anything?" she asked in a shaky voice. Caleb turned his gaze toward the fire, his jaw tightening. "I didn't buy you for that," he said quietly. "I bought you a chance." She didn't understand. The tears that had been locked behind her fear finally broke free, streaming down her cheeks as she whispered, "Why me?" Caleb's expression softened, his eyes reflecting both pain and kindness. "Because once someone gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it," he said, then looked away before she could see the storm behind his calm. He walked out into the cool night, leaving Lydia staring after him, her heart torn between gratitude and confusion. Days turned into weeks, and the girl who once trembled in fear began to find peace in the rhythm of the ranch. She learned to cook simple meals, feed the chickens, and even helped Caleb mend fences. The silence between them became something gentle, something sacred. Every morning he'd leave before dawn, riding out to check the cattle, and every evening he'd come back with the same quiet patience. He never raised his voice, never crossed a line. If anything, he treated her like a ghost that needed space to find her way back to life. Yet something deep inside Lydia began to change. A warmth that grew every time she saw him work under the blazing sun, his shirt soaked in sweat, his hands steady and strong. He carried the weight of a man who'd lost too much but still found reasons to keep going. One evening, as the sky burned red behind the hills, she asked him, "Why do you live so far away from everyone?" Caleb paused, his hand tightening around the reins of his horse. "People talk too much," he said simply. "Out here, the wind listens." She smiled for the first time in months, and he noticed, not with desire but with quiet relief, as if the world had finally shown him a sign of hope. But peace in the Wild West never lasted long. One morning, a group of men rode up the hill, led by Sheriff Alden, a tall, stern man with a star pinned to his vest and suspicion in his eyes. "Ward," the sheriff called out, "we heard you bought yourself a bride. You know what that looks like to folks?" Caleb stood silent, wiping the dust off his gloves. Lydia stepped out of the cabin, her heart pounding. "Sheriff," she said, her voice trembling, "he didn't hurt me. He saved me." The men snickered, but Caleb's voice cut through their laughter like thunder. "You done here, Alden?" The sheriff studied him, then spat in the dirt. You keep your business clean, cowboy. Folks are watching. When they left, Lydia turned to Caleb, her eyes filled with worry. Why didn't you tell them? He met her gaze, the sunlight glinting off the old scar across his cheek. Because I don't need to prove what's right to people who live off gossip, he said. She wanted to thank him, to say something that matched the weight of her gratitude, but her throat locked up. That night she couldn't sleep. She walked outside barefoot and found him sitting by the creek staring at the stars. You could have let me go, she whispered. You didn't have to buy me. Caleb's eyes stayed on the dark water. Maybe, he said, but I couldn't stand the thought of someone else treating you like property. Lydia's tears fell silently, and she sat beside him, her shoulder brushing his arm. What do you want from me, Caleb? She asked. The cowboy turned to her, his eyes tired but gentle. I just want you to find yourself again. You don't owe me anything. That was the moment she broke, not from fear but from kindness. She had expected cruelty, maybe indifference, but not compassion. She covered her face and cried, deep sobs echoing against the quiet night. Caleb looked at her for a long time, then spoke softly. Don't cry for what's gone, Lydia. Cry for what you're about to build. She looked up, her tears glistening in the firelight, and whispered, Why are you so kind to me? He hesitated, then finally said, Because once I had a wife. She was your age when I lost her. I couldn't save her, but maybe I can save someone else. The truth hit her harder than any storm. She realized the man who had bought her for $2 wasn't trying to own her. He was trying to redeem himself. In that silence, something beautiful and painful took root. A bond forged not by money but by mercy. The next morning, as Caleb saddled his horse, Lydia stood by the porch clutching his old hat in her hands. Where are you going? She asked. To sell the last of my cattle, he said. Maybe it's time we both had a fresh start. She hesitated, then stepped closer. Caleb. He turned, and she looked at him with trembling courage. When you come back, I'll be here. Not because you bought me, but because you saved me. He smiled for the first time, a faint, broken smile that spoke more than any words ever could. As he rode away into the rising sun, Lydia stood there, wind in her hair, a tear running down her cheek. Not from fear this time, but from hope. She whispered to the empty horizon, Thank you for giving me a life worth living. And that day, in the heart of the lonely West, the story of the $2 bride became more than just a rumor. It became a tale of redemption, of love born from pain, and of a cowboy who proved that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can buy back a lost soul.